Je voudrais du soleil vert, des dentelles et des théâtres, des photos de bord de mer, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Je voudrais de la lumière, comme en Nouvelle-Angleterre. Je veux changer d'atmosphère, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Ma fleur, sous la pluie de novembre, tes mains qui courent, je n'en peux plus de t'attendre. Les années passent, qu'il est loin, là je tombe. Nul ne peut nous entendre. Je voudrais du Fred Astaire, revoir un latte.
Political and policy juggernaut shaking the Democratic Party. The AOC effect. Congresswoman Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez has been in office about 3 weeks, but her ideas and what she represents are having a huge impact. Consider a rookie legislator who is legally too young to run for the Senate, let alone the White House, now has potential candidates reacting to her and criticizing her economic agenda. The first thing to know about this dynamic is it's broader than partisan politics. AOC has been arguing for a tradition of moral politics, civil rights, and economic reform that goes beyond for what passes for a lot of debate in D.C.
Social movements are the moral compass and should be the moral compass of our politics.
I do think a system that allows billionaires to exist when there are parts of Alabama where people are still getting ringworm because they don't have access to public health is wrong.
The wage gap is an injustice that persists through secrecy. It is time that we pay people what they are worth and not how little they are desperate enough to accept. He's not in the Russell Building, he's not in the floor of the Senate, and 800,000 people don't have their paychecks.
Everyone deserves justice, and everyone deserves equal protection and prosperity.
The predictable fixation only on AOC's style may underestimate her policy appeal. Plenty of other top candidates like Elizabeth Warren or Kamala Harris are running on similarly progressive economic platforms. A leftward shift, which apparently explains why former Starbucks CEO Howard Schultz is not a Democrat. That's according to his argument in a new round of interviews testing an independent presidential run against Democrats.
No, I'm not a Democrat. I don't affiliate myself with the Democratic Party, who's so far left, who basically wants the government to take over health care, which we cannot afford, the government to give free college to everybody, and the government to give everyone a job, which basically is $40 trillion on the balance sheet of $21.5 trillion. We can't afford it.
I'm going to hear from a very rich person in a moment, but first, a very rich person in ideas.
Thank you.
Liz Plank, host of Vox Media, is considered and a friend of the beat. Thanks for being here.
Thanks for having me.
I mentioned that because class is such a big part of this, and we have a very rich person on deck. When it comes to AOC versus Howard Schultz as a potential billionaire running against Democrats, what is important, you think, about the idea she's advanced?
Right. Well, I think, first of all, Howard Schultz running for president is kind of like Ja Rule organizing another music festival. Like, I don't know no one needs this right now. It's only going to actually benefit Donald Trump because obviously when we have a third party candidate, it often disadvantages Democrats.
Let me say that's a sick burn because the Fry Festival was a failure.
Yes.
Although Howard Schultz, I would trust to run a conference or a gathering more than the country.
he should organize the next Fire Festival. I would trust him to
You've hit on it.
There we go. We found your calling. But one of the really interesting things that I think him and AOC sort of, I mean, they haven't talked to each other in real life, but this sort of standoff that they have is that AOC is exposing the myth of the fiscal conservative but the socially liberal person, right? So, Howard Schultz says that he is he's taken a stance against racism. He's taken a stance for offering jobs to refugees. He's pro-women, pro-reproductive rights, but he has these very fiscally conservative policies. And what AOC has been able to do is message how those two things are actually completely contradictory. If you believe that black people and people of color in this country should have equal rights, you have to be supporting them having equal access to health care, to jobs, to opportunities. Same goes with people with disabilities. You can't go on TV and say we want to take off their entitlements. You have to support those benefits.
It's so interesting to hear you analyze that after watching her talk in the arc of moral politics, right? Yes. Because Martin Luther King is remembered for civil rights, and yet the organizing he was doing was all about black power and black economic capital and uniting with labor and organizing union walkouts in the Midwest, all of that. I want to show for you some of the praise AOC is getting today. Listen to this. MAGA fans saying she's effective. A prominent political advisor says she has something that you can't coach. You either have it or you don't. She has it big league. And then this: gameness, grit, determination, fighting spirit. Compliments from none other than Steve Bannon for AOC today.
Interesting.
President as a centrist.
We started hearing.
No, your thoughts.
Okay. Wow, that wasn't just in my head. Yes. Well, one of the things that AOC is so good at is that she's really good at messaging the Democratic Party's position on many issues. Of course, she's more to the left than what we would expect, but she's really good at messaging ideas that are actually popular, right? So if you think about taxation and the proposal that she's making, first of all, when it comes to taxing very highly rich people and the 70%, 70% of Americans actually support her and in that policy, even though it's being very, there's a lot of fear mongering on the right and a lot of billionaires like Howard Schultz going on television saying that this is very bad. The majority of Americans actually support that policy.
Right. And
it's a long-standing, it's since the 1970s. If you look back, the majority of Americans want to tax the rich more. AOC is able to communicate that message and make that exciting for people who may have not normally been on board.
And as you say, in a way that appears to be impacting some of these billionaires. Now, as promised, I want to raise the net worth of the segment. Before, do you like this or not?
No,
too much.
You're on fire. No, never.
So before I bring in this next guest, take a listen. Howard Schultz responding to the criticism he gets about being a billionaire.
I've also been criticized for being a billionaire. Let's talk about that. I'm self-made. I grew up in the projects in Brooklyn, New York. I thought that was the American dream.
I'm joined by entrepreneur and venture capitalist Nick Hanauer. He has debated the minimum wage with Howard Schultz. He's the host of a podcast, Pitchfork Economics. And as mentioned, you're a very rich guy. You've been open about that.
Yes, exactly.
You say there's something wrong with what Howard Schultz is doing. What is it?
Absolutely. I love the conversation you've been having, but I just want to make one point: is that it's easy to call what AOC is doing as far lefty, but nothing could be further from the truth. When you advocate for economic policies that benefit the broad majority of citizens, that's true centrism. What Howard Schultz represents, the centrism he represents, is really just trickle-down economics, tax cuts for rich people, deregulation for powerful people, and wage suppression and benefit cuts for everyone else without the overt racism. He is not the centrist. AOC is the centrist. And I think one of her great advantages is she is young enough not to be captured by the neoliberal lies that have framed so much of the politics, by the way, in both the Republican and Democratic Party.
That's so important what you're saying, because that always comes up when there's debates about what's happening in the Democratic Party, and there's a kind of a tailwind underneath whatever might be an open debate, and people have different views on this, and the tailwind is the incredible power of the donor class, as you know.
Yes.
And so take a listen to your point for you and then Liz, to AOC talking about working in the service industry. I mean, Howard Schultz does employ a lot of people in retail. She talks about actually doing that kind of service job. Take a look.
Right.
Little things like trying to afford health insurance when you're a waitress and that kind of economic stress and living through it and enduring past it really showed me in a visceral way what it's like to be an American in a way that I don't think most public officials understand.
Do you agree with that, Nick? And then Liz.
Yeah, 100%. And here's the important point that I think is underappreciated is it's not just the economic reality that's the problem. It's the narrative that has captured the brains of so many people in the Democratic Party that, for instance, to raise the minimum wage from $2.13 plus tips for tipped workers to $15 an hour will destroy the economy. That is just a straight up lie. There is nothing further from the truth. And the most pernicious thing about trickle-down economics is not the belief that if the rich get richer, that's good for the economy. It is the belief that if poor people get richer, that will be bad for the economy. And finally, we have some political leaders like AOC who are willing to confront those lies and to confront people like Howard Schultz.
Liz?
Yeah, if I can just agree, I think everything that she's saying is not radical at all. If you go to many other countries, right. I'm actually a survivor of Medicare for All. I'm as a Canadian, and I can tell you it's pretty great.
Is that why you're so nice? Because you're Canadian?
Yeah, it's the free health care. It's great.
Right. Nick, do you
really
think,
recommend it.
The last question, since you've crossed paths with him in those Seattle circles, Nick, briefly, do you think he will run or he'll ultimately drop out as he comes into contact with more of this debate?
You know, I don't know. I found it astounding that he was going to run as an independent. The smartest people in the country have looked at that, and there is zero chance you can win as an independent. So all you are is a spoiler. I'm hoping that he comes to his senses and drops out. Certainly the reception has not been great.
It is Thursday, the 31st of January of 2019. And you are in West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. I am your chef de cuisine, Justice Putnam, and our daily special is Metro Shrimp and Grits Thursdays, a little bit of jambalaya, a little bit of spice in your life. Well, wow, God, will no one get rid of this guy in the office? I mean, yesterday was Smothered Benedict Wednesdays, will no one rid me of this priest? When are they going to remove Trump from office? This is getting a little bit out of hand now, okay? Especially when he's actually giving orders that Vlad told him to give to us. Next thing you know, Vlad's just going to give him direct. My God. All right. Maybe something is in the works. And it'll all come to a head. And then we'll have to deal with Mike Pence. All right. Well, look. I don't mind taking them all down at once, which is probably what they're doing. I mean, if you ever saw Baltimore at that final bust, I mean, everybody. So maybe that's what Mueller is doing, and that would be fine as well. But Lindsey Graham, how many rubles are in his campaign coffers? There's something more than money, though, that Vlad has on Lindsey. Now, I'm not talking lifestyle choices, as they would say, but something. There's something there, and I think it's more than just the rubles, but I'm not quite sure, so I'm not going to put that in the stat side of I told you so, which I'm 1,000%. So until, I'm going to wait a little bit before I put it in that line, and then when time comes up, I can say I told you so, and I'll be 1,000%. Okay. What else? Boy, do not engage with that Kent State gun girl. God, and from Kent State, that is just so onerous. Oh, God. I have some interaction with Alison Krause's sister. And you think, I have grief. I mean, that family has had grief since 1971. My God. So, yeah, most everybody knows what Kent State is. I don't need to tell you. But for those of you who don't, look it up. Okay? Radical leftists. And then when I hear the term radical leftists and all that, I just figure it's, a bunch of fascists trying to find an excuse to kill people like they always do. And that's another thing. I am so over this. Christie last night on Brian Williams, the 11th hour, going off about socialist. You know, like that's an invective. It's easier to say socialist than someone who would normally be an Eisenhower Republican. That takes too many words. They can't say, well, you know, they'd normally be an Eisenhower Republican, and you should have seen how we were back then about Eisenhower Republicans. We called them commies. She's a socialist? Yeah, I guess so. I guess. I mean, her policies sound strangely similar to the Eisenhower Republican policies back in the day. So I'm just over this, because when people say that, why doesn't the media then immediately say, well, if you think an Eisenhower Republican is a socialist commie, what does that make you? They moved the goalposts. They played the refs for so long. They create the normal. They're the centrists, and over there on their right is something more extreme than they are. No, they are the extreme. Please. I don't need to tell anybody that here. You all know that, but it's nice to be reminded. Well, venture capitalist Nick Hanauer essentially put the lie to who is the real centrist, and that is Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez. I'm a little uncertain to call her AOC, or at least too much. I don't know if that's a honorific or a diss. Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez is the centrist, not Howard Schultz. Howard Schultz is, I don't know, definitely not the centrist. Okay, Medicare for all. Free medical, free college education. I came from the projects. I had food stamps. I wasn't given anything. Is this guy like, apparently he hasn't meditated like Jack and fasted, and for a week. What's on the rest of the menu here in the Bistro Cafe of West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy? Well, Trump cabinet members are doing all they can to avoid questions from Congress. Hey, only a Russian dupe like Mitch McConnell would call an election day holiday a power grab. I'm not voting. You want people to vote? What are you? Yeah, boy, that guy. He's going to jail too. He better. And despite local objections, the Trump administration secretly shipped weapons-grade plutonium to Nevada. So much for local control. After the break, we then move to the chef's table, where two bipartisan groups of lawmakers introduced legislation to limit Trump's power to levy import tariffs for national security reasons. And he'll probably get killed in committee by Mitch McConnell, because that's what he does. Oh, and guess what? Canada will reduce its embassy staff at its Cuba Embassy after another diplomat developed that unusual illness. All that and more on West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Bon appetit. Bottom of our homepage at netrootsradio.com, you will notice to the rightish of the page the chat room link monitored by Kelly Lincoln. And thank you, Kelly, for doing that. To the leftish of the chat room link at the bottom of our homepage at netrootsradio.com, you will notice then the contribute button, and all kidding aside, a recurring contribution through Patreon really puts a big dent in our ability to pay our bills. And so thank you very much. Your generosity really does do that, and we are unable to do this without you. Thank you very much for that. If you would like to follow Netroots Radio on Twitter, you can do that at Netroots Radio, and Tom monitors or takes care of that platform, and we are forever grateful that he does that too. Please follow me on Twitter at Justice Putnam. I post the show notes and links diary on Daily Kos about 10 minutes before showtime, and I get it out in the social media sometime after that. I'm sorry. And regardless, I can be found on Daily Kos as Justice Putnam. Do follow the show on Twitter at Cookbook West. Pick up podcasts by way of Spreaker, Stitcher, TuneIn, iHeart, YouTube, iTunes, and rate us on whatever platform you're on, because that just pushes, that W. Who would do that? I would, because, maybe I'm like the accountant. No, maybe I'm not. Okay, so this first article here, in the Bistro Cafe at West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy, Metro Shrimp and Grits Thursdays, is by Dan Desai Martin of Share Blue Media. Less than 1 month into Democratic control of the House of Reps, 3 of Trump's cabinet secretaries, Kirsten Nielsen, Sieg Heil, Alex Azar, and Steve Mnuchin, have refused invitations to testify before Congress. Now, Democrats in the House have sought to hold hearings on border security, family separation, and the impact of the Trump shutdown, but Trump's cabinet officials apparently want to hide rather than defend their actions. Well, of course, no one wants to testify when you know the Reichstag fire is coming up. Oh, it already happened? The attempt to hide from accountability infuriated committee members, resulting in sharp rebukes from some of the most powerful members of the House. Now, Nielsen's office says she never refused the invitation, but merely sought to change the date of the hearing to another day. However, Chair Benny Thompson's spokesperson told CNN that there's nothing false in the chairman's letter. Well, and he had sent a letter to all these people saying, get your asses down here. He didn't say it like that, but I would. And how do you get them? You send the sergeant of arms and grab their asses and bring them down there, like you would normally. Frank Pallone Jr., he's the chair of the Energy and Commerce Committee, is pretty upset at Health and Human Services Secretary Alex Azar. His statement said the stonewalling must end, and Secretary Azar must agree to appear before the committee to answer questions and take accountability for his agency's actions. Oh, another get your ass down here letter. Well, of course, Azar's testimony is all the more important after an internal investigation from his own department found thousands more children than previously acknowledged may have been taken from their families by the Trump administration. Now, the third cabinet member hiding from Congress is Treasury Secretary Steve Mnuchin. Richard Neal, chair of the Ways and Means Committee, scheduled a hearing for the impact of the Trump shutdown on tax filing, and we had reported that here in Bistro Cafe. Or, well, actually, on West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. But rather than defend the actions of the administration and the potential harm caused by Trump's childish behavior, Mnuchin wanted to send other officials to testify. In the end, the hearing was canceled, denying the American public valuable insight into key aspects of our government, because that's what Congress is supposed to do. And the executive branch is apparently part of an enemy state now. Do we wrap our brains around that? Patty Baird of Think Progress brings us this next offering here in the Bistro Cafe of West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. And you would expect a Russian dupe like Mitch McConnell to mock an Election Day federal holiday. Mocking it. And then at the same time, mocking the 800,000 federal workers who lost paychecks, and some of them haven't even gotten theirs that they're supposed to get yet. Well, he railed against that proposal that would make Election Day a holiday, arguing that doing so would help Democrats. What? No, it helps America. Elections help America. Mitch, comrade. This is the Democratic plan to restore democracy. A brand new week of paid vacation for every federal employee who would like to hover around while you cast your ballot. How little he thinks of America and Americans. I've told you the GOP hates America, and they hate Americans most of all. The bill would make the Tuesday after the first Monday in November in 2020 a day off for federal workers and encourages private employers to give their workers the day off as well. It's part of a suite of legislation known as H.R. 1 that House Democrats have prioritized since taking back the chamber. But McConnell implied Wednesday that the proposal, long a pet issue for advocates working to increase voter turnout, would just be a giveaway to Democrats. When your whole party is really an arm of a hostile foreign state, I guess you wouldn't want to give up any power to America. Us this final offering here in the Bistro Cafe, part of West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy Metro Shrimp and Grits Thursdays. Well, Nevada officials fumed yesterday after the Trump administration revealed in a court filing that it has secretly shipped radioactive plutonium to the state capital despite local objections. The National Nuclear Security Administration, a part of the Department of Energy, sent 0.5 metric ton of weapons-grade plutonium to the state. It had previously been stored in South Carolina, but a federal court ordered it had to be moved, and they couldn't find anywhere to move it. So what do mobsters do? They take it in trucks and dump it in an estuary somewhere. They couldn't find an estuary, so they took it to Yucca Mountain. Not realizing that the plutonium had already been shipped before November 2018, the state sued the administration on November 30th. The federal court had required the plutonium to be removed from South Carolina by January 1st. And Democratic Governor Steve Sisolak was infuriated by the revelation. The department led the state of Nevada to believe that they were engaging in good faith negotiations with us. Good faith negotiate. Do you know what Trump is as a negotiator? Have you ever followed his business career? Come on. Good faith negotiations. That is the most ridiculous thing to consider with this administration. My God. Well, he said in a statement they lied to the state of Nevada, misled a federal court, and jeopardized the state of Nevada's families and environment. And the Trump administration says exactly. It's exactly what we're doing because Vlad likes it. Other Nevada officials were also outraged. Senator Catherine Cortez Masto said, she's a Democrat of Nevada, said she will be holding the Trump administration to account And in a statement to Alternet, Representative Susie Lee called it deceptive and dangerous. Let's see, the NNSA confirmed that the shipment of half a ton of metric plutonium had been completed to Nevada. It suggested that such details of these transactions are typically kept secret for security reasons. In order to provide security for shipments of these kinds of material, the Department of Energy normally will not release information about the status of shipments until sometime after the shipping campaign is concluded. It did not address whether keeping local officials out of the loop was consistent with department policy. All right, let's get to our break. And when we come back from that break, we are going to go through weather from around the world in a spinning vortex of ice and finish up with the stories that we've curated for you today. You are listening to West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy, and we will be right back.
You are listening to netrootsradio.com.
Please hang up and try again.
From a point at sea to the circles of your mind, a new force is at work for planetary transformation. New radio for a new Earth.
This is Take Two Movie Review. I'm Clinton Johnston. This week, Ground Glass. Back in 2000, before Marvel Studios existed, before Sam Raimi rocked the radioactive spider bite, 3 years after Joel Schumacher tried to kill the Batman franchise and bury it in concrete, and just a few months after the world had been introduced to Patrick Stewart in a wheelchair and Hugh Jackman in claws, writer, producer, director M. Night Shyamalan sneaked Bruce Willis and Samuel L. Jackson in a smart, grounded superhero movie right under our noses with Unbreakable. And then he moved on. Shyamalan says he's not one for sequels. He's dubious about the ability to recreate or recapture a feeling. So it was a surprise when 16 years later, his serial killer thriller Split with James McAvoy and Anna Taylor-Joy revealed itself to have been set in the Unbreakable universe. Now Shyamalan brings his three stars together to complete the trilogy that we never thought to hope for in Glass. To call Glass a superhero movie is to give you unfair expectations. There are no capes, no tights, no terabytes of CGI. Yes, there are people with powers, but they exist in a grounded world that is sure of the impossibility that such powers can exist. In fact, the problem of believing in these powers sits at the crux of the movie, a movie that feels so confident. Shyamalan is ready to go in Glass. He knows these characters, he knows the story he wants to tell, and he does not wait for you. If you haven't seen Unbreakable and Split, then you'll still pick up who's who and what's at stake, but you'll feel like you just joined the book in Chapter 10. Willis and Jackson do what they do, but it's really McAvoy as Kevin Wendell Crumb and his dozen or so different personalities that steal the show. It is sick to see McAvoy work his acting chops. His characterizations are so great, which makes sense because he's already had a whole movie to build them. As much as Shyamalan likes to keep moving forward, trying new genres, telling new stories, maybe there's something to be said for taking a moment to stand on familiar ground. This has been Take Two Movie Review. I'm Clinton Johnston. Catch up with us at TakeTwoMovieReview.com and feed us back on our page on YouTube.
This is Scientific American's 60-Second Science. I'm Christopher Intagliata. One of the biggest drawbacks to wearing a smartwatch is how often you have to take it off to charge it. But here's an idea. How about charging it with a power source that's pretty ubiquitous nowadays? Wi-Fi.
Wi-Fi signals are all around us, and most of them are just wasted.
Xu Zhang, an electrical engineer at MIT. Writing in the journal Nature, he and his colleagues describe a device called a rectenna designed to capture energy from Wi-Fi signals and turn them into direct current electricity. The rectenna consists of a small gold antenna, about the size of an SD card, which converts a variety of wireless signals, like Wi-Fi, Bluetooth, and cellular LTE, into an AC signal. Next, a 3-atom-thick layer of molybdenum disulfide converts that AC signal into usable DC electricity. That layer is called a rectifier. Slap it onto the antenna, and the result is the rectenna. The device is flexible, and using typical home Wi-Fi signals, it spits out about 40 microwatts, enough to light up a simple LED display or power a biosensor. It's not enough juice for power-hungry smartwatches and smartphones just yet, but Zhang says their next goal is to build an array of rectennas to power larger devices. The scientists also envision a smart city, where buildings, bridges, and highways are studded with tiny sensors to monitor their structural health, each sensor with its own rectenna, so it never goes dark.
We can in some sense, bring intelligence to almost every object around us. And that can enable ubiquitous sensing.
Because a smart city becomes a lot less intelligent when it runs out of juice. Thanks for listening. For Scientific American's 60-Second Science, I'm Christopher Intagliata.
This is a message from CDC.
After hurricanes, tornadoes, and floods, standing water and excess moisture help mold grow in your home, garage, and other structures. When you return to a home that has been flooded, know that you're likely to have mold. Mold puts your family's health at risk. If you have mold growing in your home, you should clean it up and fix other water problems, such as leaks in roofs, walls, or plumbing. Keep your children and pets out of affected areas until you've cleaned. Control moisture in your home to prevent mold growth. To remove mold growth from hard surfaces, use commercial products, soap and water, or a bleach solution of no more than 1 cup of household laundry bleach in 1 gallon of water. Follow the manufacturer's instructions. Never mix bleach with ammonia or other household cleaners. It will produce dangerous, toxic fumes. Open windows and doors to provide fresh air.
For more information, visit cdc.gov or call 1-800-CDC-INFO.
This is an important message from the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services. When it snows this winter, make sure you clear more than your driveway. Before you hit the road and before you get in the driver's seat, check to be sure that your vehicle's tailpipe is clear of snow. If the tailpipe is blocked, carbon monoxide, an odorless, colorless, and deadly gas produced by your engine can build up quickly inside your vehicle, poisoning anyone inside. To learn more, call 1-800-CDC-INFO. That's 1-800-232-4636.
Hi, I'm Tom Hartman, and since you're listening to netrootsradio.com, show your progressive side and go to the donate button on the bottom of the homepage. It's progressives like you who power Netroots Radio and keep the progressive message beaming everywhere 24 hours a day. Just go to our donate button at the bottom of netrootsradio.com. Thank you for keeping progressive radio at full power.
It's time for Nicole Sandler's What's News from NicoleSandler.com and the Progressive Voices Network.
Donald Trump is reportedly still seething over Tuesday's testimony of the nation's intelligence chiefs at an annual congressional hearing on global security threats.
We know the president was angry because you can tell just from the tweets he sent around 6 a.m. as he watched the highlights, essentially, of those intelligence chiefs testifying on Capitol Hill. But what's new tonight is we're learning that the president singled out the Director of National Intelligence, Dan Coats, specifically during his morning rant about that coverage of what had transpired yesterday. Now, he didn't name Dan Coats in those tweets this morning, but according to two people familiar with what the president said today, he was going after Dan Coats specifically and was very angry about the snippets of the interview that aired where Dan Coats was saying that it's unlikely that North Korea would ever give up its nuclear weapons. Now, that goes against what the president has said. He knows what Dan Coats' feelings on that are because Dan Coats is part of that intelligence briefing that the president gets regularly. But what we're told is the president was more frustrated by the coverage here. Those TV chyrons, those newspaper headlines that said the intelligence chiefs had contradicted him on this.
Trump showed his ire and his ignorance on Twitter Wednesday morning, tweeting, "The intelligence people seem to be extremely passive and naive when it comes to the dangers of Iran. They are wrong. When I became president, Iran was making trouble all over the Middle East and beyond. Since ending the terrible Iran nuclear deal, they are much different, but a source of potential danger and conflict. They're THERE. Their economy is now crashing, which is the only thing holding them back. Be careful of Iran. Perhaps intelligence should go back to school. In response to Trump's incredible missive, Senate Minority Leader Chuck Schumer wrote a letter to the Director of National Intelligence, Dan Coats, imploring him to do the impossible and educate the president.
Senator Schumer's letter to Director Coats says President Trump's criticisms of the testimony you and the other intelligence leaders provided to Congress yesterday was extraordinarily inappropriate and will undermine public confidence in the U.S. government's efforts to protect our national security and preserve U.S. power and influence abroad. I believe it is incumbent on you, Director Wray and Director Haspel, to insist on an immediate meeting with the president to educate him about the facts and raw intelligence underlying the intelligence community assessments, and to impress upon him how critically important it is for him to join you and the leadership of our intelligence community in speaking with a unified, accurate voice about national security threats. He is putting your colleagues in an untenable position and hurting the national interest in the process. You must find a way to make that clear to him. Educate him. In other words, do the impossible. Do what no one has ever been able to do.
Senate Democrats introduced a bill Wednesday that, among other things, would make Election Day a federal holiday. But on the Senate floor, Mitch McConnell balked at the idea, admitting that if it were, Republicans would lose elections. MSNBC's Chris Hayes explains.
Mitch McConnell is pretty upset that Democrats are trying to make it easier for people to vote. The first piece of legislation House Democrats have introduced, H.R. 1, would simplify voter registration, reform gerrymandering, and create a federal holiday for Election Day, among other provisions. McConnell has already written a very angry op-ed about this horrible offense, and today he took to the floor to continue hammering on the theme.
Just what America needs, another paid holiday and a bunch of government workers being paid to go out and work. I assume our colleagues on the other side, on their campaigns. This is the Democrat plan to restore democracy?
Ah, yes. What could be worse than giving people a day off on Election Day so they can vote? How nefarious.
At the risk of being redundant, it's cold out there. Thanks to a breakdown in the polar vortex, the Midwest is being flooded with record cold air. Chicago hit its all-time record low of 27 below zero. At least 10 deaths are linked to the extreme weather this week. More than 4,800 flights have been canceled. Schools are closed. Mail deliveries suspended. Blood drives are called off. And in Chicago, commuter train service is setting tracks on fire for safety. Remember this? It was July of 2017 when Donald Trump made this grand pronouncement.
Foxconn will invest in southeast Wisconsin, while a larger facility is constructed over the coming years. And that facility will be about the biggest there is anywhere. The company's initial investment of more than $10 billion will create up to 13,000 jobs in the very near future.
Well, like everything else Trump has promised, this one's not happening either. Despite $4 billion in tax breaks in exchange for a promise to build flat screen panels at a Wisconsin plant and hire up to 13,000 workers, the electronics manufacturer is changing its plans. Foxconn says it can't compete with lower-cost flat panel plants elsewhere in the world, so it's going to create a technology hub in Wisconsin instead of a factory. 3/4 of the jobs will be in research, development, and design rather than the blue-collar manufacturing jobs Trump promised when the deal was announced. And that's a bit of what's news for now. I'm Nicole Sandler. If you appreciate these reports and the Nicole Sandler Show, I hope you'll consider making a contribution. My work is 100% listener-supported, and I can't do it without your help. Find out more at NicoleSandler.com/donate.
From UN headquarters in New York, I'm Luke Vargas with your World in 2 minutes. The British Parliament handed Theresa May seemingly contradictory instructions on how to execute a successful Brexit this week, as lawmakers approved amendments condemning the prospect of a no-deal exit from the EU, while sending her back to Brussels to tweak an agreement EU officials insist can't and won't be changed. EU leaders are hardly holding their breath that a new round of talks with May will be any different than those that have come before.
From their vantage point, it looks like Groundhog Day.
Bart Oosterveld directs the Atlantic Council's Global Business and Economics program.
There's a fear in Brussels that reopening parts of the agreement is opening a Pandora's box There's a lot of topics that weren't resolved to everybody's full satisfaction in the draft agreement, and there's a strong reluctance, outright unwillingness actually, to reopen all or parts of it.
Still hoping the EU will cave and offer concessions, the Commons voted Tuesday on an amendment from Conservative Graham Brady that orders May to seek alternative arrangements from the EU that would sweeten up May's Brexit deal, though it's hardly clear what those arrangements would be. All the while, Britain is speeding toward a March 29th Brexit deadline, and if May can't win support for a deal by then, the UK will crash out of the EU with no arrangements in place. Lawmakers were evidently concerned enough about that prospect to back an amendment condemning a no-deal Brexit, but they stopped short of formally mandating a Brexit delay if a no-deal scenario looks likely. But as the Brexit clock runs down, former British ambassador to the U.S., Sir Peter Westmacott, says Parliament can still take the keys away from the Prime Minister if she keeps on getting rebuffed by the European Union.
One of the key reasons why this Brady amendment went through was that members of Parliament were told that on the 14th of February, lovely Valentine's Day present, they're going to get another chance to vote on the question of possibly outlawing no-deal Brexit.
Luke Vargas, The United Nations.
Thank you for accompanying us here to the chef's table at West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy Metro Shrimp and Grits Thursdays. A little bit of jambalaya, a little bit of spice in your life. We always begin weather from around the world along the banks of the Rogue River in the Rogue River Valley of Southern Oregon on the west coast of the continental United States of America, where it is currently, yes, it is currently 33 degrees Fahrenheit. We're supposed to be warmer today. We're supposed to be at 61. And we were supposed to be at 61 yesterday, and we got to maybe 53. So you tell me. Sometimes these forecasts, the range are a little bit off, and that's the way weather is. Climate, that's a whole different question now. Winds are still a negligible 1 mile per hour out of the east. Other people would call that light and variable. We're clear, apparently, but at the same time, we're under an active dense fog advisory, and I looked out, and we're not clear. Unless it's clear that it's really dense fog. Maybe that's what they mean. It's clear that it's really dense fog. Because it is. It's really dense. But it will burn off probably maybe about 11 o'clock noonish local time. It burned off quite a bit just around 1 o'clock yesterday. So we'll see how that is. Winds will remain light and variable throughout the day and night. And except we will have a little bit of a possibility of rain overnight. And then we're looking at a half an inch of rain tomorrow, where winds will have shifted out of the southeast at 5 to 10 miles per hour, and rain throughout the weekend with a mix of rain and snow on Sunday and snow or snow flurries on Monday. So, wow. Of course, next week, maybe I won't be leaving on Wednesday. Maybe I'll be leaving on Thursday, but that's probably the day I need to get out of town next week to get down to my father's 90th birthday bash. So we got a little banquet hall for him, and we're going to fit in about 70 people, friends, students, former students of his, who are probably bringing their great-grandkids, too. Wow. And so it should be fun for all, but you will not miss any of the expected Kagro in the Morning shows. I anticipate, once again, being back Tuesday-ish. I'm hoping weather isn't an issue driving through the Sierra Nevadas, let alone the Siskiyous. Okay, so right now Air quality, pollen is none. Air quality is good at 46 parts per million. It's starting to creep up into the moderate range at that level. The daytime UV index is low at 2, but with this dense fog, how is that possible? Barometric pressure is falling at 29.71 inches. Visibility is down to 3 miles here. Well, they got that one right. And relative humidity is at 92%. Weather from around the world is brought to you by people's personal weather stations that they purchased. These people planted these purchased personal weather stations somewhere on their property, and these people positively live around the world. London is 38 degrees and partly cloudy. Paris is 36 degrees with rain and snow, and yes, they have a freezing and snow advisory. Rome, Italy is 49 and mostly cloudy, and they have heavy wind advisory. Heavy wind. Kiev is 33 with fog. Kabul is 31 and mostly cloudy. Now's the time for the wedding parties. Dense fog is even better, but mostly cloudy is pretty good. Hong Kong is 67 and fair. Tokyo is 36 with rain, and they are under an active flood watch. Sydney, Australia is 69 degrees, cloudy and windy. San Francisco, California is 53 degrees and cloudy with a gale watch. And one more time, here we go. New York, New York is 8 degrees Fahrenheit and sunny. And well, let's see what your weather advisory is. I can only imagine a small craft advisory as well. Oh my God, it's the day after tomorrow. Look out for the feral wolves. Wolves are usually feral, but look out for them because they will walk across the Hudson on the ice pack. So take care. And that is weather from around the world, brought to you by people's personal weather stations that they purchased. And these people planted these purchased personal weather stations somewhere on their property, no matter how frozen the ground is. And these people positively live around the world. First Amuse-Bouche here at the Chef's Table at West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy is brought to us by Chris Prentice of Reuters. Dateline, Washington, D.C. U.S. lawmakers yesterday introduced legislation to limit Trump's power to levy import tariffs for national security reasons. Well, it would be the president, but we don't use the P word with Trump. It's Trump, but it really would apply to all presidents, you would think. The bills face an uncertain future, but underscore bipartisan concerns on Capitol Hill over the rising costs of the Trump administration's trade policies because Congress controls the purse. Vlad doesn't like that, and so Trump's trying to just do an end around, like a back channel. The United States in 2018 slapped duties on aluminum and steel from other countries, drawing criticism from lawmakers who support free trade and complaints of rising supply chain costs across business sectors. Because all this guy knows is how to brand and put his name up on a building. He doesn't even do the building. Two bipartisan groups of lawmakers introduced legislation known as the Bicameral Congressional Trade Authority Act in the Senate and the House of Representatives. Why? Why it's bicameral? The bills would require Trump to give congressional approval before taking trade actions like tariffs and quotas under Section 232 of the Trade Expansion Act of 1962. The current law allows the president to impose such tariffs without approval from Capitol Hill. The imposition of these taxes under the false pretense of national security is weakening our economy, threatening American jobs, eroding our credibility with other nations, said Republican Senator Pat Toomey of Pennsylvania, a co-sponsor of the Senate bill. Now, Toomey led a similar push last year. That did not go to a vote. I wonder who was running the show then, Mitch McConnell. Comrade. It is unclear that Congress would consider taking up such legislation now. Still, the bills underscore mounting pressure from lawmakers to address concerns over tariffs, especially those on Canada and Mexico, as lawmakers ready to vote on a new North American trade deal agreed to late last year. Republican Chuck Grassley from Iowa, chair of the Senate Finance Committee, earlier pressed the administration to lift tariffs on steel and aluminum imports from Canada and Mexico before Congress begins considering legislation to implement the new pact. Numerous business and agricultural groups have come out in support of the United States-Mexico-Canada agreement, but have said its benefits will be limited so long as the U.S. tariffs and retaliatory tariffs from Canada and Mexico remain in place. Republicans Mike Gallagher of Wisconsin and Darren Hood of Illinois, and Democrats Ron Kind of Wisconsin and Jimmy Panetta of California introduced the House legislation.
Je te donne ce mon amour pour la vie entière. La promesse de me trouver à tes genoux. Aussitôt que tu m'appelles, rester toujours fidèle. C'est tout, c'est tout. Je te donne tous mes printemps, mes étés de mer, mes automnes quand les feuilles tombent partout. Si ce n'est pas une bonne affaire, je te donne tous mes hivers, c'est tout.
Anna Mailer-Paperny, also of Reuters, brings us this final amuse-bouche here at the chef's table at West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy Metro Shrimp and Grits Thursday. Canada has decided to cut the number of diplomatic staff in Cuba by up to half after another person fell ill, Ottawa said on Wednesday, bringing the total to 14 Canadians suffering mysterious symptoms since 2017. Canadian and U.S. diplomats in Havana first began complaining of dizziness, headaches, and nausea in the spring of 2017. The U.S. reduced embassy staffing in Cuba to a maximum of 18 from the more than 50 after more than 24 personnel developed unusual illnesses. Canada's diplomatic staff in Cuba will drop to 8 from 16. A further reduction in the Canadian embassy footprint is deemed to be the appropriate response, a Canadian government official told reporters. The November incident was the first new Canadian case reported in months leading to the decision to reduce the remaining staff. Spouses and dependents left last year. The Cuban ambassador to Canada, Josefina Vidal, said in a statement that Havana considered Ottawa's decision incomprehensible, given it would not help solve the mystery of the health incidents and would hurt bilateral relations. This behavior favors those who in the U.S. use this issue to attack and denigrate Cuba. The Cuban government has been cooperating with a Canadian investigation into the cause of the illnesses, which has not been determined. I wonder if some of the explosive or maybe some of the LSD impregnated cigars that they tried to give Fidel made it into the diplomatic consulates. Well, Vidal said there was no evidence that might reveal any brain damage or that may explain the varied symptoms reported, or that may indicate that these symptoms had occurred due to the stay of the affected diplomats in Cuba, like maybe they picked it up somewhere else, like maybe from, vaccines. Now, more than 1 million Canadians visited the Caribbean island last year. No number on any who got sick while visiting the embassies, but we'll find out. It is unusual. Something's going on there, and it may be mass hysteria caused by the LSD-impregnated Cuban cigars that Fidel didn't smoke. You just never know. All right, we got to get out of here, and we will be back tomorrow for Blue Moon Spirits Fridays. Do stay tuned to Netroots Radio all day and all night for all the breaking news as it breaks. And we'll meet up here tomorrow, right here in West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Bon appetit.
Je voudrais du soleil vert, des dentelles et des théières, des photos de bord de mer, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Je voudrais de la lumière, comme en Nouvelle-Angleterre. Je veux changer d'atmosphère, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Ma fleur sous la pluie de novembre, tes mains qui courent, je n'en peux plus de t'attendre. Les années passent, qu'il est loin, là je tombe. Nul ne peut nous entendre. Je voudrais du Fred Astaire, revoir un latte Goël. Je voudrais toujours te plaire dans mon jardin d'hiver. Je veux déjeuner par terre, comme au long de golfe clair, t'embrasser les yeux ouverts dans mon jardin d'hiver. Pluie de novembre, tes mains qui courent, je n'en peux plus de t'attendre. Les années passent, il est loin, là je tombe. Nul ne peut nous entendre. Ba-da-da-dum-di-da-dum. 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 Dans mon jardin d'hiver. Ba-da-da-dum-di-da-dum. 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 Dans mon jardin d'hiver. Dans mon jardin d'hiver. Dans mon jardin d'hiver.